Ladies and gentlemen, look at the beautiful marbling on this meat. These wonderful fillets, no, that's not all I got from that piece of meat. I got more than this. I have a total of 8 fillets and plenty of extra meat on the side that I'm going to be able to use for some other projects. A beef tenderloin goes a long ways, and when I was finished prepping my meat, my steaks are now around $8 a cut. That makes a pretty good price for a choice fillet.
Well, howdy folks. Welcome to Texas Cooking Today. We are in the heart of Dallas. That's downtown Dallas behind me there. And folks, we're about to get in the kitchen and cook some delicious food. What you're watching right now is one of my tutorial versions. And if you don't need to know the techniques and how to pull this recipe off, if you just need the recipe, the previous episode, it's much shorter. That's just the recipe version. But these tutorials go into technique, methodology, history, and a lot of other information. Let's get in the kitchen and get busy cooking this delicious dish. Come on.
Today it is about the beef tenderloin. I'm going to show you some things about a beef tenderloin, and we're going to go into the history of the beef tenderloin and learn what certain names mean. Words like Mignon, Fillet, Chateaubriand, things like that. And I'm going to explain what those are, how did they get those names, why those words exist, and how certain things have changed over time. This is going to be a full breakdown on not only just how to prep a beef tenderloin, but some of the history of this wonderful and popular dish. Guys, this is your beef tenderloin. I've got a beautiful one here. This is a Black Angus beef tenderloin. Wonderful thing. You know, before we get started with this, I want to mention something. Black Angus. I'm not marketing for anybody, okay? And nobody has paid me to promote them or anything like that. But I wanted to mention something about this particular word. If you see the word Black Angus used on beef, well, there is a law. I mean, it's very closely guarded by law. That and there are patent and usage rights, also copyright rights, when it comes to the terminology Black Angus, okay? The industry insists that in order to use the words Black Angus, you have to be selling beef that is a minimum of choice quality. So you're either getting choice or prime if you purchase the label Black Angus. That's just all there is to it. So the minute you see that band, you know you're not looking at select, you're looking at least choice beef. If it is a select cut, for instance, if the inspector grades the cow and it grades as select, then even though that may be a Black Angus cow, it cannot be sold as Black Angus beef because it didn't make the cut. It has to be at least choice. Well, folks, that's what this is. This is a choice cut of Black Angus, and I thought this would be a good one to use because that's really what most people are buying. Now, normally, I would have gone over to a little shop over here that I like to go to that a lot of restaurants in Dallas also buy from. That's normally where I get my pork, or excuse me, my, not pork, but my beef tenderloins. Generally, I can get a beef tenderloin at this one place for about $120 to $130, and it's prime. All right, how do you know if it's prime? Well, when meat packers are packing certain cuts, if it's choice or prime, it will always be stamped on the outside of that package. That's what we have here. Right here, USDA choice, Angus. Can't have those words on it unless it's at least choice. It says it's choice. That was how it was graded. There's your USDA stamp right here. So all of that's what you're looking for if you want to know how to grade your beef. This one's a good cut, and let me explain what the difference is in choice and select and prime. Those are different grades of meat, and it has to do with the amount of what's called intramuscular fat. Intramuscular fat is the fat that's on the inside of the meat that makes it look marbled. Okay, if it's smooth and red and there's no fat on the inside, it's usually going to be select. Choice, you're going to see a moderate amount of grain, meaning little thin strips and lines of fat on the inside of the meat. Prime, you're going to see a lot of that intramuscular fat. It is that fat that makes the beef more tender. It also adds a lot of flavor to the beef. So that ups the price and the value. All right, so when you're looking at a beef tenderloin, don't be surprised to be paying and then around the $10 range. In Texas, that's what we pay. In Dallas, I paid $10 a pound on this one. A lot of stores will be selling these things for up to $15 a pound, and if they're selling it for more than that, you need to look around a little more. And like I said, I can get a 6 to 7 pounder for around 120 to 130 that's prime. So, make sure you're not getting cheated on your product, all right? Shop around a little bit. It pays off, especially on an expensive cut like this. And folks, if you're walking through the store and you see one, just reach down and grab it. Don't be afraid of it, because I'm about to show you what you need to know. Now, on our history, before we get into opening this up, the history on this, there's some different words. Mignon, okay, you hear that used a lot. You hear Chateaubriand, you hear Fillet. All of these words relate to this, but they are not all the same. For instance, fillet, what that is a boneless cut of meat, okay? It's usually a prime cut, one of your better quality cuts, and it's usually across the grain, okay? Not always, but usually. Fish, it can be a little different for a fish, but again, it won't have bone. It will be just a clean piece of meat that's been prepared. So that's what a fillet is. Now, mignon is that's a French word, by the way, fillet is. Mignon is another word that is related to this. Mignon means dainty or light. Or delicate in some cases. So what they're referring to by that is the small tip. You see on this guy, there's a fat end and there's a skinny end. And this little tip right here, from about here on up, that little piece is what's referred to as mignon, because it's dainty, it's light, it's very thin, okay? It's kind of frail, it comes apart easily. So that is the mignon, that very small tip. Then you hear the word Chateaubriand, okay? This is a word that changed a lot over time. When this particular dish gained its name I think it was 1866. The French ambassador to England, his personal chef, created this dish and named it after him, which was, oh my gosh, I hate to try to pronounce this because I would probably get it wrong. Pierre de Chateaubriand. Francisco Pierre de Chateaubriand, if I remember right, was the guy's name. All right, so the Chateaubriand was named after the guy that was being served to, essentially. Okay, cool. It was a different dish back then. Okay, the Chateaubriand was what we now refer to as a fillet. Okay, a thick cut of this dish right here, or the center portion of the tenderloin, okay? And we'll show you that to you in a minute, and I'll define those a little more in a moment. Well, now it has come to be known as just the whole center cut that's pan-seared and then finished off in the oven. Okay, well, that's not what it was originally. And it's sort of like the word computer, okay? That's another one that changed over time. 100 years ago, the word computer meant a person that computed or crunched numbers, essentially. All right? That's what they did for a living. And now a computer is a machine that you carry in a bag or have it sitting on your desk at home, okay? And it performs computational tasks for you of all different kinds. Okay, so computer changed, and so did the Chateaubriand. So originally a fillet of beef in France, when you were ordering a tenderloin fillet, would have been about a 1-inch thick cut, all right, and that would have been normal. And that was, you know, we're talking a couple hundred years ago here. So that has morphed a lot. Now a fillet is a 2-inch thick cut, which was originally, well, back then, what the chef served to Chateaubriand and named the Chateaubriand, which is a double thick cut of the center cut of a beef tenderloin. There's your naming, okay? And there's some of your history on it now. So I don't get too long-winded about this. I'm going to open this thing up. You don't need to watch me open a package. I'm going to open it up, dry it off, and once I have it sitting here on this red board, I'm going to show you the different components, show you how to break it apart, and how to use this in its most efficient ways, okay? There's a lot of different cuts you can get from one of these, and they're really fun once you get into them. So let's get busy on this. Come on. Okay, folks, we have, as I mentioned before, different sections of this meat, and we're going to process this out into all of its different components, okay? And that way we can cut our fillets, or we can do a modern Chateaubriand, or we can do one of the old-fashioned Chateaubriands, which was a bit smaller and prepared more like a modern fillet. Okay, so let's take a look. Turn this over here. We can see a little bit of rough butchering going on here from the packing plant, unfortunately. And sometimes you're just going to have that happen, guys. It's going to happen, so be kind of prepared for it. There is a part at which this tapered muscle gets a little bit thicker, and it happens usually about 4 to 6 inches in from the very tip here. So from here up to about here, that is where I have that little piece of meat there, which we call the mignon. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove that guy right now. Okay, there's my mignon, and I'll deal with it in a moment. There's some neat stuff that you can do to shape this into a wonderful steak, and I'll show you that here in just a second. Now you might be thinking, hang on, why did you go ahead and remove that instead of doing all the other processing first? Watch. Pay attention, guys. When I'm processing a piece of meat, if you've ever noticed from the way I do my cooking show, I will usually break it down into its constituent muscles first. Okay, so as you see, what I've done here is I've actually separated part of the head meat, this piece up here, from the rest of my muscle, which is a separate muscle here. So you have two different muscles kind of joining it together as one right up here. This is at the butt end of the cow, folks. That point, the other end over there, that's closer to the rib cage, okay? So this gets towards the rear of the cow, where actually the sirloins are underneath this, all right? So when you're looking at a cow, that's the part we're talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and break this guy free from here. See that? Come on. Isn't that nice? Now sometimes you get a little tip like this sticking out. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. That's going to be used for other things. Never throw away any of the meat product from a beef tenderloin like this, guys. That is just a waste, so you don't want to do that. Now this guy up here, if you'll notice the knife I'm using, yes, not a boning knife like you see a lot of people using. I wanted to show this to you with a knife that most people are going to have at home. So you see where this silver skin kind of runs up underneath there? I'll pull it back with my fingers a little more. That's where we're headed with this, okay? So just kind of follow the silver skin and separate that head meat from it, okay? Got a little bit on the head meat right there. Not bad. Nothing worth losing sleep over, right? Push my knife through there and take it off. All right, so look what I have hanging on here. Done. Okay, right there I have my head meat. Folks, I'm going to explain something to you. If you go to a restaurant, you'll be lucky if you get this. This is reserved for the best customers when it comes to steakhouses and places that serve this particular cut of meat. That right there, if you want to know what to ask for, you don't ask for the mignon, folks. You ask for the head meat. And if you're lucky, you'll get it, okay? It's one of my favorite parts. Now, we have a lot of silver skin on this side, so this gives us a good chance to really kind of teach how to get silver skin off of there. Silver skin's a kind of a pain in the rear, and on some cuts of meat, you can actually take your silver skin and just pull it straight from the meat. However, when you have a cut of meat that is very tender, the way this cut of meat is, it's not so easy to do that. Now, what I want to do first is remove some of the outer fat from the silver skin. So I'm going to reach under here and pull this up. Now you're going to notice when you do this, if you've got this part on yours, like I have it on mine, that this is going to separate out into, again, two separate muscles. And it was the one I mentioned earlier over on this side right here. That is a good piece of meat, folks. Do not throw this away. You see, I'm pulling it apart, but I started to tear the meat underneath, so I don't want to pull any more than absolutely necessary. Once I get to a certain point, if it doesn't want to come apart, just very gently run your knife lengthwise right along the piece you're trying to save, which is this one. Okay, so there I go, cutting that away from what I'm wanting. See there? Now up here at this point, we have another point now. We separate these two. Just that easy. As I mentioned, don't throw this away. This can be cooked up into so many good things. Remove some of the heavier portions of fat and that silver skin and grind it, and imagine the hamburgers you get to have with that darling. Oh, wonderful piece. Here we are, down to the nitty-gritty. We've got our silver skin running right here. There's different ways that the chefs will do this. Some of them cut free part of the end here, then using a boning knife, a very flexible knife that will bend easily, they will turn their meat over and put the knife down flat and run it underneath there, and it just strips that silver skin off of there. Unfortunately, a lot of times it also sacrifices a little bit of meat, and that just drives some of us nuts. Let me turn this around so I'm cutting away from myself. Always cut this way. Try to avoid cutting this way because that blade can come backwards toward you, and you don't want that to happen. We'll start right here on the edge, very gently, just kind of lifting and pushing in a rotating manner. I want to work my knife underneath that silver skin, lifting it up off of that meat to that other side. There we go. I'm just going to cut that off. There we are. So there we go. We're starting to remove our silver skin. There's a little bit here I've kind of missed. You're going to do more than one pass on this as you're removing it, so don't think you'll get it all at once. I've never been able to do that myself. There we are. Okay. Now, once I get it kind of freed up from one end, I'll turn it again. That way I can cut away from myself. I'm going to start with that first little string that I cut loose. Now, when I'm doing this, folks, I don't run my knife straight into it. I take my blade and I turn it upwards like this, just slightly, not as much as you just saw me do, but I just slightly. And that way it cuts towards the silver skin, which is very sinewy, and it's kind of hard to cut through that stuff. But it helps you to not get too much meat into what you're working with there. So, grab a hold of that silver skin, pull, and there we go. Take this off. See how I keep that blade turned slightly up? Now let's take a look at what I did here. I'm going to turn this guy over. What very tiny amount of meat is on that isn't really a serious sacrifice. And you can see how this technique works really well to remove silver skin. Now, if you're lucky enough to be working with ribs and you're trying to remove silver skin, it's easy. You grab the corner and pull it off. Ribs are a lot more durable than this cut is, folks. So don't try that with a beef tenderloin, because what it'll do is it'll separate the meat fibers and it'll rip it apart is what it'll do. All right, folks. So the larger portion there has been worked out. Now I've got this little tip left. I'm going to take that and remove him right where he becomes about 1 inch in diameter. All right, again, I'm not going to throw it away. That's a very good cut of meat. I'm going to use it. Okay, we had that mignon. Let's pull him back out. I just want to clean up my mignon a little bit. There's another deep cut right here where they got a bit rough at the packing plant. But if you'll notice on this tip, look at all of this extra fat going on here, this loose fat. It's very soft and gentle. Okay, some of that I can just clean up. You can leave that on there if you want. It's up to you. Some people believe that makes a very tasty mignon to leave some of that fat on there. Of course, if there's any silver skin under there, you'd want to remove it. That's what I'm taking out right there. There we go. This almost, in its character, looks like a skirt, you know, with it as grainy as it is on this particular cut. They're not usually that grainy, but this one is kind of unique. Now, this is part of that chine that we removed. So this part is your actual mignon. And if you notice on this one, it is so very dainty. Now it can be pressed, and that's normally what they do is they'll press them from the tip down, forming them, and you get something of a steak out of that. And sometimes to hold these together, they'll wrap it with bacon and do a little fillet that way with it. Okay, but that right there, that is, believe it or not, the mignon. Now this right here, part of this one, that's what I'm going to be grinding in a little while, because I'm going to enjoy some very special hamburgers. Oh yes. But I want to clean up the rest of this, because I'm not going to grind all of that. Look at that nastiness, folks. Come on. That isn't cool at all. So what I need to do is remove the meat from this mess. And with this, your butchering can be as rough as you want, especially if you're going to grind it. Generally, these are cut into all kinds of different things. They make good stew meat also. Fantastic for a very special chili. Very, very high-end chili, or you could just add it to some other ground beef for a chili. So here I have meat for the grinder. Now I want to set this aside in another location. We'll get on with the rest of this. All right, when it comes to that head meat piece, now here's a little tip that I cut off earlier. When it comes to this, what we're going to do is just square up these ends a little bit. So I've taken that off, given myself a nice square end on that. And I want to do the same on this, but I want to come back about 2 inches, all right? That's going to give me a good fillet. If I wanted a really big fillet, I'll just do this, and I have about 2.5 inches. There we go. There is your head meat fillet, guys. Does not get better than that when it comes to which cut to ask for. I'll be looking forward to enjoying that in just a little bit. Now the bottom of this, if you want to clean this thing up a little bit and remove some of that heavier outer fat, you can do that. Me, I don't like to take off too much myself, because I'm one of those guys that likes the flavor of that fat, so I like to leave as much of it as I can. When it comes to cutting a fillet, an old-fashioned fillet 200 years ago would have been a 1-inch cut, so I'd have been cutting here, and then here, and then here, and here, and here. And then came along a gentleman who prepared a steak for an ambassador to England. It was the French ambassador to England. His name was Chateaubriand, and he was the guy that the dish was named after. And what it was just a double thick cut of a fillet. So it was a 2-inch thick fillet rather than 1 inch, and that became known as Chateaubriand, what was named as Chateaubriand. Then over a period of time, that kind of got changed to where people will take this whole center cut, or a portion of it, usually an 8-inch or 7 to 8 inch portion of it, and then use that center cut for their Chateaubriand by pan searing off the whole outside, then finishing it off under a broiler. It's a great way of doing it, but it does show how things do change over time. Now let's take a look at this. I'm going to cut some nice, thick, looky there. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the old-fashioned Chateaubriand. That. Isn't that nice? I have one here, a little bit smaller steak. Some very good sized steaks there. And we are ready to go. So this is how you're going to break down one of those beautiful beef tenderloins. Now, when we were talking about grating meat earlier, what you see here, these little veins and specks of fat on the inside of the meat, that's what grades the meat. And the inspector, when they're inspecting meat, to grade it, they cut into the cow's rib cage between the, I think it's the 12th and 13th ribs, if I remember right. And then they look at the meat at that point and grade it based on how much of this stuff is going on the inside of that meat. All right? And so that way all the cows kind of get graded under the same standard and by the same technique. And you get good uniform product that way. If this had twice this much intermuscular banding like this would have been prime, okay? And had it had none of this, obviously that would have been a select piece. This is choice right here, and that's what choice looks like once it's cut, and you can see that intermuscular fat. So there's your grading on it, just that simple. Folks, thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. Here are the other cuts, and I have this ready to get ground up. And I have this one, my little darling, set aside for me to cook up. It's a good cut. You're going to enjoy it. Folks, it doesn't make sense not to grind your own meat these days. Okay? Anymore, you constantly hear problems with ground beef and other things, you know, salmonella, giardia, and this kind of stuff, and it's really kind of scary. So you want to be really careful, and if you're grinding your own meat, as long as you clean this equipment well, you're pretty much okay. So what I want to be doing is placing all of those trimmings that I didn't use into my grinder and making a top quality grind. There we go. Isn't that beautiful? Folks, whether it be a manual meat grinder or an electric one, once you do your own grind, you're never going to go back to anything else. That's the best, and it's so delicate and soft. This makes for good dishes. Well, we're finished with the butchering. We have got these gorgeous looking beef medallions. I'll tell you what, folks, that's when it comes to a fantastic looking fillet, that's as good as it gets right there. And the thing of it is the fillets I've just cut, if you go to the store and buy fillets like this, of this quality, you're easily going to be paying $12 to $15 each for them. And guess what? No, I'm paying closer to $8 each for them. All right? All because I did my own cutting, and it's not hard. Plus I get all the extra goodies to make special goodies, and it's going to be fun. Folks, please enjoy your fillets, enjoy the holidays, and have a good day. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
That's it, folks. That's all there is to it. That was a great recipe. And now you know everything that you need to know about how to pull it off. That was one of my tutorials, and I really appreciate you watching. If you would do a few other things for me, got my comments box down there. Please fill that thing up. If you have a comment, suggestion, if you have an idea for another recipe, requests, whatever, put it down in there. Believe it or not, I read them. Thank you for watching. Check out the channel. Subscribe if you haven't done so. And folks, please just have a good day. Bye-bye.